Hey, if there's one thing that new coaches struggle with, it's that they ask a lot of close-ended questions. Now, this isn't true of every new coach, but it's true of a lot of new coaches. Close-ended questions, questions that technically, literally could be answered with a yes or a no, a this or a that, an A or a B or a C. There's a closed number of responses that are available. And so a lot of times these are also leading questions. So have you thought about calling your wife? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? Do you think you could? Whatever. And so it's kind of the coach's way of sort of introducing an idea, into the conversation. And that's, of course, one problem with close-ended questions. But there's maybe even a bigger problem with close-ended questions, and that is what's the impact that they have on the client, and just sort of what's the context that they create in the coaching conversation. And so what my experience has shown me is the more close-ended questions that a coach employs, the more they're setting up a context of thin learning. What I mean by that is they're kind of training the client not to go very deep in their thinking. And so a close-ended question, have you, could you, did you, those kinds of things, they don't sound like discovery questions. They sound like test questions. And so what the client is doing mentally is they're kind of like, oh, they're asking me a question. I should already have the answer to it. And so even if they don't answer, with a yes or a no, which most clients are polite enough not to give a yes or a no, even though it's a yes/no question, the client tends to not go very deep in their thinking. They don't dig very deeply. And so those kinds of questions, not only does that particular question not evoke a ton of new awareness, but it kind of sets the tone in the conversation and even in the whole relationship that this isn't a conversation or a relationship that creates a lot of new awareness. We don't go very deep. We just kind of skim the surface, but we don't really plumb the depths and really get that client working. And what you want from your coaching questions is you want to get that client working. You want them to be creative. You want to tap into their resourcefulness. You want them digging deep and coming up with things that they have never come up with before, or connecting things in a way that they haven't connected before. And so minimize the use of your close-ended questions. Instead, go for curiosity questions. And so, for example, if you're thinking, gosh, I wonder if this person needs some accountability, instead of saying, hey, do you want some accountability? Just say, hey, what does accountability need to look like in this situation? Or if instead of, introducing an idea like, hey, have you thought about calling your wife and asking her what she thinks? Just say, hey, what's your wife think about this? And by the way, that may sound like a subtle difference. And it is a subtle difference for that particular coaching question. But over time, question after question, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 questions, those subtle differences really add up, and they create a context where the client is invited to just go deeper and to do more work and to get greater awareness from the coaching session. So avoid the close-ended questions, ask the curious questions, and you'll serve your clients even better.
Be sure and subscribe so you don't miss any of our great content.